This is our third virtual chapter meeting this week. And I see some repeat offenders here, and I see some new people joining us as well. And hopefully these are working out. I know everybody's a little bit tired of doing everything virtually, but it does allow us to get some additional guests and things together. And it gives us the opportunity to hear from some people that don't necessarily live where we have chapters that we're able to take advantage of. Today is no exception to that. And today's subject is going to be technology and the fragmentation of the guest experience. And we've had actually three very unique speakers this week, each coming from a different perspective in the industry. And let's go through our agenda for the day. Then I'll introduce Don and we'll start our conversation. So it is a virtual session. We will start by asking Don to introduce himself. He'll tell us a little bit about the background, but he's actually going to share with us his perspective. He might even plug the books that are on the shelf behind him. And he'll share his perspective on this subject. We'll then go ahead and open it up to all of you to do the Q&A with Don. And then we're just going to go do our general discussion that we would normally do at a meeting. And I see that Douglas has a drink there, so I think that's good start. So as far as the housekeeping is concerned, you are muted when you enter. And then during the live Q&A, you can unmute. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and do it under the Q&A tab or certainly in the chat, which people have been doing. We would ask you to stay away from any questions regarding sales, pricing, any political discussions, and certainly any disparaging remarks. And this is being recorded. It will be made available to members when we are done. And so with that, next slide. Yep. Okay. So I'd like to introduce our speaker, who I know many of you certainly would know of, and Rob, I certainly hope that you know him very well. Rob Jacoby, who actually works with Don. But Don Fox is the CEO of Firehose Subs. He is more than just the CEO and an innovator, an entrepreneur of a company in the industry that's very well known and respected. He also is very involved with the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association, the Fast Casual Council of the National Restaurant Association. And so I think his perspective, not only as a CEO, but also spending time with so many others in different places, I think is going to be very helpful to us. So Don, meet members of the IFBTA. And I'm going to turn it over to you first to go ahead and just really formally introduce yourself, the background, and your perspective.
Great. Thanks, Rob. And it's a real pleasure to be here with everybody today, and looking forward to a great dialogue after I get done with some of the upfront comments. A little bit more about myself. Been in the restaurant industry all my working life, 48 years. Started out as a professional dishwasher. Definition of professional being you got paid to do it. Learned early on washing dishes in an Italian restaurant that your best friend is the cook who stirs the sauce pot. Anybody who's washed dishes in a restaurant knows what I'm talking about. I won't go any further. All right, but my aspiration was to be a trumpet player. I was going to be a musician, but gave that a stab until I was 22 years old, all the while earning a living in restaurants. I was working in management with Six Flags Great Adventure amusement park. Decided at 22 I should focus on a food service career. Loved it. Loved the environment, the hustle, the bustle, people, everything about it. But at that point felt I should go work for a restaurant company if I was going to carve out a career there. So that brought me to Burger King. I moved to Florida. I went to work in Burger King company operations in the Tampa market in 1980. God, it seems so long ago. And spent 23 years with Burger King. In many respects, the most important time frame was from 1989 to 1995. I was in research and development in the operations arm of R&D. Almost every major company has those operations specialists. They usually cull from out of the field, and you go in and work on project teams. The great thing I loved about that was you're working with every discipline in the organization. And as long as you're if you want to be a sponge and soak it all up, boy, it was the most I ever learned in that amount of time. Called a 6-year degree in brand and systems. Worked a lot with the IT arena in those respects, especially a lot simpler back in those days. Basically your POS, some little bit back of house. That was about the extent of it. Went to Firehouse in 2003. We were a 65 unit chain at that point, just on the early stages of franchising. We used a 2-tier model of franchising, network of area representatives and traditional franchising under that. From a technology perspective, we were just then going to a cloud-based POS. Up till 2003, we were with a little electronic device on the register, not wired to anything. It was basically a fancy calculator and a till. We went our initial POS was Radiant. Remember Radiant Systems, which later NCR bought out. We were using RPOS, was the operating system back then, which we just migrated off of after all these years. It was a little long in the tooth then, actually, even back in 2003. And then over all these years, not only have we grown from the 65 restaurants in 2003 to 1,200 today, but evolved a lot of technology along with it. We're a long way from that CRS. That was the name of the cash system on the counter, and ties in with what we're going to talk about, which is the fragmentation of the customer experience. That's all about the varied number of channels of trade, all of the additional ones really coming along with associated technology, and then the challenges that it's created. There have been some solutions out there, but I would submit still that there's a lot of challenges for brands to integrate all of that. So that's me, and a little bit of a setup for discussion today.
Great. So first of all, don't feel bad on the years there. I think I remember Burger King with Fast Facts, and I'm not so sure how many people on this call would actually know what Fast Facts is.
Before that, Documenter.
Well, I was going to say Documenter because when I was a restaurant manager with Bob's Big Boy, we were Documenter. And and it actually still exists today, but it's the same company, but I didn't even know it was still out there and ran across them, I think, in Texas a couple of years ago. But anyway.
I'm going to do you one better because we're going to show it. There is glory in showing our age. Before that, the first one I worked with in Burger King, Mannix.
That big one I don't know.
Square box. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Anyway, thank goodness technology has evolved, but I digress. Go ahead.
There you go. All right. Well, so clearly we have somebody who understands the evolution of technology, but we are talking about some disruptions. Don, there's a couple of things that you said in that introduction I'd like to go back over. You were talking about trade channels, and there's a lot of areas of disruption. Now, we've had conversation with people also. It's not just trade channels, but it's also, I don't know, we call it guest channels or different types of customers. So do you want to address that a little bit more? Give us a little bit more of a description of what we're talking about there and where you see either the disruption or the intersection of technology with that?
It's so interesting. The restaurant business generally for decades is very linear. And I don't know all the attendees on the call. I don't have a list, but I'm going to assume that we're across different segments of the industry here. So some QSR, fast casual, casual dining. Is that?
They are, and you have some suppliers on here as well who are also members.
So a broad cross section. A lot of my frame of reference is more QSR and fast casual, but I've been in the casual dining arena a little bit, so I understand some of that environment. But generally, very linear in terms of order input, production, much simpler. And especially if you're talking about QSR. And in fact, even fast casual in many respects, considering that a lot of fast casuals don't have drive-thrus. If I think about Firehouse Subs for years, I mean, other than a phone order coming in, everything was lined up in front of the counter. Now, people would consume the food in different places, and there was a different usage case maybe, but getting to the restaurant was the same in terms of how they retrieved the food or took it away. So all more similar than not. And your solutions for providing great service were very homogeneous. There wasn't a lot of distinction between how you dealt with a takeout order versus a dine-in. In fact, Firehouse was different in that respect because we did table service with food plated. That's unusual. Most brands, Five Guys these days is a good example. They, as far as I know throughout their history, they package everything to go. It doesn't matter. Presentation, it's in the bag, fries, lopped in, grease on the outside, I guess part of the culture, right? Boom, doesn't matter. Dine in, take out, simple. Some operators say, oh, I'm sure they have debates about paper costs that they could be avoiding if they didn't do it for dine-in. But their culture has been simple, consistent, execute it as best we can. Anyway, so much simpler, linear universe. And now, you can have 6, 7 different channels. Look what happened with, in some respects, until there were aggregators for third-party delivery. Every single one of those, in some respects, was a different channel, certainly an input point. So, and then lots of differentiation in terms of how the orders are received, queued up, produced, prioritized. Prioritization is a key issue for restaurants in this world of this fragmented, stratified orders coming in. But then you have the consumers themselves too, because the consumers, I don't think, are monolithic. Not to say that there aren't some customers who only use a brand a certain way. In fact, this is an area that it would be great to have more data on. And I don't think, and I've not seen good industry data on this, or even brand specific data. I don't have it for Firehouse. But in terms of, all right, well, who, it from your loyalty customers to some extent, perhaps that's your best source. But generally speaking, like how many people can you really identify that only use you for online orders? Well, Rapid Rescue are branded. How many are, and they exclusively use you for that? What customers exclusively use you for dining and never for another need state or occasion? I don't think anybody really has them clearly identified. So you look at the variation in customers, like what are their expectations? Are they expecting, regardless of the channel of trade they use, an experience that is absolutely precisely as identical as possible in all respects? Or do they readily acknowledge that there are going to be differences from the order input to even elements of the branding, certainly to the state of the product that they receive? That's always been, even before technology, that's always been a challenge for brands. How does your food travel versus how is it in-house? Some of these different channels of trade aggravate that situation a little bit because not every takeout order is the same. Not the quality of every off-premises transaction is the same. The quality considerations for a traditional takeout order where somebody came in and placed it at the cash register to take it out, regardless of how far they're going to travel. We can't control that. We don't know how far they're going to go. They're going to eat in the car. What are they going to do? You try to anticipate the need state, design your product maybe to have the longest shelf life. But you've got that type of off-premise location. Well, that is a lot different thing to engineer for than the third-party delivery order. See, the one where somebody ordered in front of you, they're going to take it immediately freshly produced. And now you got the benefit of that freshness, if you will. Third-party delivery, and when the driver shows up. Think about from a technology perspective, you get that input order, it's all on the premise that the driver is going to get there at a certain point in time. Well, do or don't, that's up for grabs. When do you engineer for the shelf life of that product? Like, what is the permissible amount of time it will be, or how does technology play a role in that, in determining when it's still good to go, if you will, for the driver to pick up?
You haven't changed your model. It's just how you're delivering on that model and to whom you're delivering that model has changed. Is that correct?
Well, yeah. And so the key is when you're engineering things. So again, it's such a more complicated world. And this is still, I would say for us, I would still call it an evolutionary stage. And I think it's the case for all brands. Like, do you go ahead and start to slice and dice your processes to treat product differently that is set up to go traditionally? Are you going to apply a different process to the order that is being staged for a delivery driver? For that matter, it's product staged for that customer who ordered online and is coming to pick it up himself. That's a whole different ballgame, because then the customer is managing some of the expectation that they will have for the food. You see, if you had a promised order time, and because all these considerations come into the psychology of the consumer and their expectations. They place an online order, you have a promised time, you do your part, the food's there. Customer knows, they put it in, they agreed to it. Yes, I'm coming to pick up my order at 12:35. We produce it accordingly. We do our part, it's there. They don't come in on time for whatever reason. Now, if I'm at all a conscientious consumer, I know now I'm perhaps compromising the quality, but that's my fault. I came in later. But on the restaurateur side, yeah, I know it wasn't my fault, but where do I draw the line on when I'm going to willingly let it be a bad experience?
Is it disruption because you now know who that customer is? They've now identified themselves to you like they never did before. Is it a disruption to suggest that they allow you to know when they are getting close so you can deliver a better experience?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, and so, because we've got all the geofencing and we know somebody's coming and so on. Great in theory. And there may be some better solutions out there that I'm giving, and some maybe people associated with that are on this call. All right, so I'm familiar with some of the proposals, the formats, what it can potentially do. But the suitability becomes highly dependent upon the cuisine and the actual engineering of the restaurant and the production timelines. Yeah, if I was back in my Burger King days and somebody was telling me, okay, the customer is within 60 seconds of driving on the lot, sure, I'll bag that Whopper and fries. I got it. Firehouse Subs, that's not going to work. All right, I am still, I've got 2 minutes and 45 seconds just to heat the meat and cheese on the sandwich. So the expectation with the geofencing is, a lot of people aren't even driving 5 minutes to get there. So where do the devil's always in the details, right? So where do you set the parameter? What's the trigger point? Size, so many things come into play. Well, so a lot of critical decisions. I think the solutions are unique to brands, depending on their engineering. But every one of these channels has its own nuances. They're different enough that I would submit that is, well, I haven't found it yet where there's like holy grail of one solution.
So are you actually either out of necessity over the last 24 months, maybe you were already doing it before it was on the drawing board. Are you doing alternate channels today of where the outlets are, setting up in office buildings, using lockers, maybe partnerships with hotels? I'm not sure exactly what they might be, but are you actually exploring or putting those things in place that are non-traditional to your brand?
We've done some off-site with actually production that's novel. That was really born of special events and so on, but then we were able to do spin-offs on that. We're fortunate with our brand because we have actually very portable prep. Our steamers, while we do have, they're 110 volt normal, plug in, get some water, boom, you're in business making Firehouse Sub sandwiches and just some standard refrigeration and a toaster. So very, very portable and deliver the exact same product experience as you're going to have in a restaurant. So we're portable in that sense. We have started with some of our non-traditional partners in airports, that type of thing, doing some grabbing go, some products, not hot subs yet.
The Micromarkets and the grab and go in the airports, especially with the labor issues, seems to be an up and coming trend.
Yeah. But this, again, opportunities are really brand cuisine specific in terms of the ability to leverage some of those things. If I'm doing cold sandwiches, that's like low hanging fruit to be able to do. Cooler, much longer hold times, good quality, much easier to manage. You start dealing with hot product, a more difficult proposition. again, for all concepts, it's going to vary depending on the cuisine, the prep method, the holding characteristics. I think these days, for virtually all brands, especially during the pandemic, what's happened with ghost kitchens and ghost brands. The term ghost kitchen ends up covering a lot of different areas. Actually, a lot of things get bundled under the name ghost kitchens.
Well, people don't necessarily understand it, as we found out recently this week. So, and actually, you know what, Don? As I talked to states about this, Florida included, who ran a conference this week on it, even they don't really understand, those things and the opportunity for it. But you're doing some alternate channels there that might, be able to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I find the whole ghost kitchen, ghost brand, ghost product variations fascinating to follow. So looking at what's happening, we have a ghost kitchen operation in this, again, the variant of it where we're in just our operator has just the production area. They're only doing third-party delivery, renting space in a consortium I think it's the one that the Uber founder did, and now the name is escaping me, North LA. We're in Chick-fil-A, has a couple spaces. They're doing large volume out of it. Bars, I won't throw a number out, but modest performance. I've got a whole slew of thoughts in terms of the suitability for different brands and concepts. For the delivery only model, where you're actually leasing space for it, having the CapEx, even though it may be modest with equipment. I think is that forcing you, since we are in a technology call, is that forcing you to look at different technologies? I mean, I did notice that somebody submitted a question about, are you incorporating any AI, to help you with some of this? We know that people like McDonald's have invested heavily in that by buying a company, but are you finding that you have to put in the technology backbone to be able to support these different things beyond traditional point of sale, online ordering, and things like that? Excuse me. Well, and probably one of the key things in terms of managing the channels of trade was when we used Novodyne as our provider, as an aggregator to roll up the third party. That was vitally important. It's a cliche now to talk about the iPads and everything, but it was very much needed to get the integration directly into the point of sale device. Going back to the linear nature of production, because our production methodology is still just very linear. We are kind of old school in our restaurants, I must say, and then we still have paper tickets that go down a runner. It's very entertaining to watch. But old school. One of the practical challenges, it's funny, some things when you look at a layout.
But just to be clear on that, is that really old school, or is that a distinguishing factor for you in the personalization of how you interact with the guests? Because handling paper tickets is a lot different than having a sticker or label you put on, or a digital kitchen display that you knock the stuff off and, it's just.
I mean, there may be, it's for us, our continuation of the old school, have the POS printer, print out the ticket, goes on the runner, the production line, it's working its way down the line until we get to what we call the steam out station. And, sandwiches final assembly, packaging, and boom, it goes. That ticket is made to travel down there. Very linear. You're controlling the whole thing. There's tactical execution in terms of large orders and where you break up the tickets and there's a bit of an art to it. Customer perception of it, I couldn't say. We've never done anything more actionable on changing, because frankly, our challenge has been physically the challenge with doing anything other than that. We have done some, now I should say, in our what we call our community design for a long time. If you're Googling it, your Firehouse Restaurant of the Future is where everybody calls it Restaurant of the Future until they're doing it like every brand. So anyway, that we went to a CRT display. So we have displays in those units and brought more tech into it, because there we could redo the production area from scratch to our liking. So that's where most of the evolution will take place. But in most of the 1,200 restaurants, You don't have, at least we haven't seen the potential for a return on investment to go in and massively blow up the production scheme for the sake of getting rid of paper tickets, certainly.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me just ask you this. 1,200 restaurants, so you have a franchise community. What is the average number of units a franchisee has?
The average is 2.5 right now, but we have some.
Is that like the difference between a 12-inch sub and a 6-inch sub?
Very good. Now we have our largest operator is 34 units. We have a large number of larger operators, but we're still at a stage in our development where we have a number of single unit operators. Pull that average down, maybe because they're in unique geographies where that's it, or just newer franchisees and they're earlier in their development agreements. Our sweet spot, if I could wave a magic wand, I'd say, look, give me all 5-unit operators. Not all. I'd say that would be my minimum, because 5 gives you scale, resiliency. I always say with 1-unit operators, you're one road construction project away from a disaster when you own 1 unit.
Are most of the people that are your franchisees, are you their sole brand, or are some, putting aside an airport brand, right? Okay, so perhaps we should be also talking about the trade channel of franchisees, right? And the disruption there. You really are teaching them the business. And are you finding that there are newer challenges of getting them to make the changes in a brand that has stayed with very traditional things, but now is expanding and testing a restaurant of the future and things? What are those challenges and disruptions going to be in your channel?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I've most of my career, I've worked with franchise systems, Burger King, all those years, and the entirety of Firehouse. And generally speaking, matters of change are never easy, especially when we're talking about technology. It's just.
But I bet getting your franchisees to invest in technology became a lot easier in the last 24 months.
Well, not necessarily. Not necessarily. And we're doing extraordinarily well, record sales. In fact, with the pandemic, our sales were negative for only 10 weeks at the start. So we were very fortunate. We did the right things we needed to do to quickly get turned around. The first 4 weeks, we were 45% negative as a system. I know everybody has their war stories. We've been hearing, we've all been telling them, so I won't belabor it. But credit to our team, our brand, for getting it turned around very quickly. And since mid-May of 2020, we've had record sales without fail every week.
Is there something you attribute that to, by the way? Is it just because all of a sudden people thought you're...
and technology played a role in this. We were a very early adopter of online ordering, going back to, 2004, maybe? Archaic systems. We had an online ordering process that you couldn't tender payment. In fact, when you place the online order, it couldn't even give you what the total was for the order. You didn't find that out until you got to the restaurant. And then when the customer placed the order, it went via fax machine. It got transmitted from the online order to a fax machine, printed it out, made the order, and then had to then ring it up on the POS when the customer got there. That's when they paid. But at the time, I was sort of innovative. And so we evolved it eventually. We started, where we benefited in the pandemic was that it was about 2014, 2015, when we were experiencing a notable decline in our dine-in business. One thing that was a little different about us as a sandwich shop is that the majority of our business historically was dine-in. Very unusual. Subway, Jimmy John's, Jersey Mike's, take your pick, well below 50% of their business is dine-in. It's predominantly takeout. we were different for a number of reasons. But starting in 2013, that dining business started to slowly at first drop, then increasingly so. And the warning bells were going off in like 2014, early 2015, when we dropped below 50% of our business dine-in. All of a sudden, now we're looking at 3 years of data of gradual but steady decline. We say, hey, we are no longer majority of our business dine-in. We are by a small margin, but primarily takeout. And we had better shore up that experience. So we really doubled down, started doing more work on our online ordering, our app, also coincidentally, more work on our loyalty program at the time. But the key was our packaging more than anything else. And we had historically wrapped our sandwiches, and it wasn't the best packaging, presentation, heat attributes, appearance. But we made a decision that got rolled out in mid-2017 to go to a bagasse, is the material. Is usually a pulp sugarcane derivative most commonly. Highly biodegradable, very environmentally friendly, but the main thing is the quality characteristics are vastly better than other packaging alternatives. So we had been working on all these things, embraced third-party delivery, worked on the Novodyne application, the integration, had those things in place prior to the pandemic. We're having a lot of debate about how much we promote them, especially what we call our rapid rescue, which is the online ordering. You come in, pick it up, you're out the door. Lot of debate about how much we should put into that advertising message. And we were, prior to the pandemic, that accounted for about 7% of our sales. And third-party delivery, which, by the way, we were promoting as a franchisor, third-party delivery. Promoting it to our franchisees, I should say, encouraging them, which I was like a lot of people. I did not embrace third-party delivery when it was first coming on the scene.
Can we talk about, but third-party delivery as well as curbside pickup? Because it is different than coming in the store, and you've sort of talked about that too, right?
Yeah, and curbside we ended up implementing in the pandemic. That curbside was the one thing that we had to come in with after the fact. So the other things were all in place, and we just had to ramp up the execution, get the teams focused on it to make sure we're firing on all cylinders, and most important of all, we turned our advertising onto our rapid rescue in particular. That we started in the 5th week of the pandemic. We decided to go on air with that altered, quickly changed, edited advertising. And that made a fundamental difference. And all of a sudden, 4 weeks after launching that, we're back up above 2019 sales levels. Because we quickly told the consumer at the worst part of the pandemic, I shouldn't say worst in terms of illness, but worst in terms of government action that limited things. I closed our dining rooms on March 16th, that first Monday, closed them across the entire system. So we had the assets in place and advertised them, and that fundamentally really changed our performance and carries through this, because people then discovered us for use case situations that they certainly weren't going to experience us in those use situations as quickly as they did because of the pandemic. We didn't really have to work very hard to bring them to those use situations. That's the only options they had when we closed down the dining room. So curbside was something we had to implement. We had to quickly try to make some tweaks to our online ordering to get that flag. We were pretty nimble with that. A challenge we still have is when curbside, for those operators that we have that are using it, because we haven't done it, we haven't mandated it, it serves an optional thing. So that has limited somewhat what we've done from a technology perspective to completely bake it in to our systems. I mean, if it was mandatory, we're rolling it out everywhere, and we probably do some things different than what we are right now.
So just out of curiosity, if we change the nature and the disruption of the delivery and trade channels, are you now tracking things like curbside or delivery, and maybe you were always doing this, as separate revenue centers from what you're doing in the restaurant?
Yes, we track through our POS, then sometimes for some things you're down to human error on input, distinguishing between a dine-in and a traditional takeout, let's say, making sure they ring in the destination. But some are flawless. An online order, precisely it's there. Third-party delivery order, precisely. A phone order, they got to make sure to ring it up as a phone order. So there's some human error in the assignment of the business to a channel. But that aside, that's marginal in terms of what it does to affect the data, or especially for our purposes for decision making.
Right, but I think you know what, with just a couple minutes before we open it up for Q&A, I do want to change the discussion a little bit to your role in the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association. What would your thinking be? How would your thinking be different in technology's role if you're talking about an independent or a small to medium business, versus what you have the capability of doing? Is there something that you believe that there really needs to be a better focus on at that level?
Yeah, I think, the independence, I think technology is just as important for the independents. Let's put it this way. The opportunity is there to exploit it just the same. As you know, there are providers that can bring those assets. Generally speaking, I'll use Grubhub as the example. Grubhub really developed their business by being a provider of online ordering to have the platform. No delivery. Right. They were providing for the independents, first and foremost, an online ordering portal. Valuable, more valuable now than ever. I mean, my gosh, in the pandemic, think about independence and how critical. I mean, gosh, those that had it in place already, probably much better off than those that then tried to implement. Just try to build awareness after the start of the pandemic that you got it if you never had it before. And that's going to lead to I'll come back to that awareness factor in a moment. But you have loyalty programs, certainly, again, third-party delivery, integration, those things. An independent can benefit in many of the same ways. I think the challenge for the independent, and this is something where, somebody like a Grubhub tries to add value, but and maybe since I'm not an independent, I'm not as on top of the value add that a Grubhub or let's say or loyalty programs bring to the table. But I think the big challenge for the independent is how do they make their customers aware of the ability to use that technology, and then communicate to them the value that it adds if the customer avails themselves of it. Wait,
hang on 1 second there. So I would probably have a discussion on this, that probably pre-pandemic, half the customers didn't know that the independent small could even they probably didn't do an online order or have delivery. But don't you think it's the assumption now? So therefore, it's not a matter of marketing out, letting you know that you have it. It's more a matter of making sure they're able to find you, because I think they assume you have it.
Yeah, I don't know. My intuition isn't good on that in terms of it, because it's funny. My wife and I, we use independent restaurants. I mean, some good old hole in the wall Italian places, and we have favorite places that we go to. Frankly, we don't use them that way though. Even during the worst part of the pandemic, as long as the dining room was open, that's what it was kind of nice for a while because we were the only people there.
Don, I really want to thank you. I think I have this strange feeling we're going to invite you back, and that there's a whole bunch of other subjects that we could be talking about today. We do have a few upcoming events. The IFBTA will be well represented at both the Restaurant Finance and Development Conference, as well as Food on Demand. We'll be speaking at one and we're supporting the other. You'll see a kiosk and you'll see our team there. We also will be participating in the Restaurant Leadership Conference. And in January, for those of you who've never been to the NRF show in New York, we are going to be supporting a food technology pavilion in NRF, which is a huge technology show in the retail industry. And there's a lot of a great opportunity to go see that as well. The other new thing that we're bringing forward is a speed dating program. It's not your typical sales matching program that we've seen over the past year to do away with virtual trade shows or to do away with trade shows. But we are looking for you to go to ifbta.org/connections. There's a survey, and then you should stay in touch as we look to match people together with common interest questions and things where they can support each other. So with that, we're going to conclude this meeting. I'm hoping really that the next set of meetings will potentially be in person, which would be awfully nice. But I know we're looking at the first quarter, so it may be virtual again. But there are some opportunities to get together. And Don, thank you so much. And for our members, this will be posted, and we appreciate your participation all week. So thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thanks, Rob.